Should you sell your house after your spouse dies? Hello, y'all. I'm Diana Brienne. When your spouse dies, should you sell your house? Well, I've known quite a few people who've lost their spouse, who, whether it's a man or a woman, they've lost the person that they were married to, the person passed on. And that is a very traumatic situation to go through for most people. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and she just recently lost her husband, and she was talking to me about that possibility. You know, I'm thinking maybe down the line, maybe I'll sell my house. And we had a really good discussion about it, and I don't give advice or suggestions, and she knows that, but I gave her my input and I gave her my thoughts on it. And, you know, I have seen people that selling their home was the right thing to do because maybe they couldn't afford it, you know, on one income, and so they had to sell. They had there was no practical reason for them to keep it. Even if they had wanted to keep it, they couldn't keep it. They couldn't afford to do it. But I've seen other people who sold their home that could keep it, but chose to sell it for other reasons. Maybe they wanted to move across country to be with their kids. That may or may not be a good idea. I've seen people who go and move where their kids are for their kids to move away, and now they're stuck where they don't know anybody, or they have to move again with their kids wherever their kids move to. So there can be complications with that, although sometimes that can work out really, really well as well. So we have to know that everyone's situation is different. What works well for one person may not work well for another. And so I got talking to my friend about this, and it reminded me of several people that I knew that one had moved across country to be with her kids, and I think she really, really misses where she lived, and I think she was very able to live where she lived, but chose not to. Another one, I think, probably has regret of selling her home because her home was paid off. It was small, but after her husband died, she didn't want to live there alone, and so she moved into kind of one of those extended care places, and it was very expensive. And now she was paying several $1,000s out per month, whereas she only had to pay for the upkeep of her home had she stayed there and maybe shut off a couple bedrooms and kept things simple. And even the maintenance on it, if she had to call someone, wouldn't have been that much. And as far as being by herself, she could have gotten one of those things you wear around your neck where you push the button and, you know, they send someone out, you know, which was like $25 a month. And now she moved out of that extended care type of situation and moved into an apartment, which is costing her nearly $2,000 a month for rent. And here she could have stayed in that same house, in a beautiful house that she loved, probably for maybe $400 or $500 a month. I mean, you know, so, but everyone's situation is different, and now she's working with her situation, and she's quite happy now. But I think in hindsight, I think she probably would have stayed in her home. And some people need to do it for financial reasons, but for those that don't have to do it for financial reasons and can stay, often taking one's time and not just suddenly abruptly selling a home as soon as one's spouse dies is probably the best way to go, because if you take your time, often you will think differently a month, 6 months, and a year, and 2 years down the line than you will when a situation first happens, a loss first happens. So I think for, you know, should you give up your home, should you sell your home, it's an individual thing, but I think it's one that great thought needs to go into. Like I said, some financially they have no option. Others, they're totally by themselves, they're older, and they need to be around one of their adult children. I got all that. But some people have a situation where they can stay put where they're at, and with some maneuvering and some smart ideas, they can, you know, maybe stay there indefinitely where they're at, and maybe their house is paid off, or it's very low mortgage or whatever, and they're able to afford to stay there rather than go out and rent an apartment, which may cost them more money, or, you know, move somewhere where they're not familiar. It just all depends. Everyone's situation is different, but I do think when people lose their spouse, that is one of the biggest questions that first come about. And so, do I sell my house? Do I keep it? And there again, what works well for one person may not work well for another. So I think it depends upon the individual circumstances. But often the more time that we can take in the decision-making process, we can look back in hindsight and know that we're making the right decisions. That, how we feel today may be very different, and the circumstances may be very different in a year from now or 2 years from now. We may want to stay put. We may say, hey, I'm so glad I didn't sell. It's a lot cheaper for me to stay here. Or we may say, hey, I'm glad I am selling because it's too much for me. It's too much. But often, if we just become creative with where we're at, often we can stay where we're at, okay? From my house to yours, may God bless you. I hope you like, share, subscribe, and I hope to talk to you soon again. Bye-bye.